The first time Sophie Lane looked into Matteo Voss's eyes, she was holding a diamond that was not a diamond. Outside the windows of Bellwether Crown Jewelers, Portland rain slid down the glass in silver lines, blurring the expensive cars parked along the curb. Inside, everything smelled like polished wood, velvet boxes, and money old enough to become cruel. The store had gone silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that made every breath sound like a confession. Sophie stood behind the repair counter with a jeweler's loop pinched between her fingers, the engagement ring resting on a square of black velvet in front of her. The ring was beautiful at first glance. Platinum setting, hand-cut filigree, a center stone large enough to change a woman's future. Around it, a halo of smaller diamonds burned beneath the warm showroom lights. It was the kind of ring rich women extended their hands with slowly, not because they wanted anyone to admire the ring, but because they wanted everyone to understand what kind of man had bought it. The woman wearing it had done exactly that. Bianca Calder stood on the other side of the counter in a cream-colored coat that looked softer than forgiveness and probably cost more than Sophia's car. She was tall, delicate, composed, with honey blonde hair, folded into a perfect twist and lips painted the same red as warning signs. Beside her stood Matteo Voss. He had not introduced himself. He had not needed to. The room had recognized him before Sophie did. The manager's voice had changed. The security guard had straightened until his spine looked painful. The wealthy couple near the emerald case had suddenly remembered somewhere else they needed to be, and the four men in black suits who entered behind Matteo did not look like assistants. They looked like doors closing. Matteo Voss was taller than Sophie expected, broad-shouldered in a black cashmere coat, with dark hair combed back from a face, too controlled to be handsome in an ordinary way. His beauty had sharp edges, a straight nose, a hard jaw, a mouth that seemed unused to explaining itself. A faint scar ran near his right eyebrow, pale against olive skin. Tattoos disappeared beneath the cuffs of his shirt, just visible when he moved his hands. He watched the world, as if he had already decided what it was guilty of. And now, he was watching Sophie. "Say it again," he said. His voice was quiet. That made it worse. Sophia's stomach tightened, but her hand did not shake. She had spent 12 years learning that rich people respected confidence only when it came from someone rich enough to punish them. From a curvy woman in a grey repair uniform, confidence looked like attitude. Intelligence looked like jealousy. Honesty looked like disrespect. Still, she looked down at the ring again. Then she lifted her eyes to his. "This diamond is fake." Bianca laughed. It was a beautiful sound, bright and poisonous. "Oh, that's adorable." She tilted her head, letting her diamond earrings tremble. "Are we sure she works in repairs and not in comedy?" The store manager, Conrad, rushed forward so quickly his polished shoes slipped on the marble. "Mr. Voss, I apologize. Sophie she's very thorough, sometimes too thorough. What she means is—" "No," Matteo said. "One word." Conrad stopped breathing. Matteo's gaze never left Sophie. I asked her what she meant. Sophie swallowed. She could feel every pair of eyes on her body. On her hips pressing against the repair apron. On her soft arms. On the curve of her stomach beneath a plain white blouse. People like Bianca always knew how to make Sophie feel larger and smaller at the same time. But the stone did not care about beauty. The stone only told the truth. Sophie turned the ring carefully beneath the lamp. The setting is genuine, old platinum, custom work, probably from the 1920s. The side stones are natural diamonds, high clarity. But the center stone isn't natural. It's not even a high-quality lab diamond. Bianca's smile thinned. Sophie tapped the loop gently against the counter. "The refractive pattern is wrong." The inclusions are too clean in the wrong way. There's a faint doubling at the edge, and whoever reset it damaged one of the prongs, then polished over the mistake. Matteo's expression did not change, but something in the room did. His bodyguards looked at the ring, then at Bianca. Bianca's face stayed perfect, except for one thing. The color drained from her cheeks. For 1 second, just one, Sophie saw terror behind the polish. Then Bianca recovered. "You're re-embarrassing yourself," Bianca said softly. "Maybe you were used to repairing pawnshop chains and high school promise rings, but this is a Voss heirloom." Sophie's pulse jumped. Voss. She knew that name. Everyone in Portland who read between headlines knew that name. Voss Holdings owned hotels, waterfront properties, restaurants, shipping routes, private security firms, and entire neighborhoods where police arrived late and left early. People whispered that Matteo Voss ruled the Northwest from a glass tower overlooking the Willamette River. They whispered that men disappeared after betraying him. They whispered that his engagement to Bianca Calder was not a romance but a treaty. 2 dangerous families, 1 diamond, 1 public announcement. 1 woman behind a repair counter, about to ruin all of it. Sophie should have apologized. She should have called herself mistaken. She should have handed the ring back and watched Bianca walk out with her beautiful fake smile and fake diamond. Instead, Sophie said, "The heirloom may be real. This stone isn't." Bianca's eyes sharpened. "You jealous little." "Careful," Matteo said. Bianca froze. The single word had not been loud, but it struck the room like a gunshot. Sophie looked at him then, truly looked. There was no tenderness in his face, no embarrassment, no wounded pride, no fiancé's instinct to defend the woman beside him. There was only calculation, cold, precise, dangerous. "Who had access to the ring?" Matteo asked. Bianca blinked. "Excuse me?" He turned his head slightly toward her. "Before today." Her lips parted. A faint sound came from behind Sophie. Conrad was sweating near the diamond case. "I had it delivered from the vault this morning," Bianca said. "Your people handled it. My people don't breathe near Voss property unless I allow it. Then perhaps your people may yo-wo. My people lose fingers before they lose diamonds." The air went colder. Sophie felt her own heartbeat in her throat. This was no longer about jewelry. This was about power. Bianca leaned closer to Matteo, lowering her voice, but the silence carried every word. "Darling, this is ridiculous. Are you really going to let some clerk humiliate me?" Matteo looked at Sophie. "Is she lying?" Sophie almost laughed, because the question was absurd. Not because she did not know the answer, because a man like him should not need confirmation from a woman like her. But he waited. He really waited. "No," Sophie said. "I'm not." Bianca's hand curled at her side. Then the front window exploded. Glass burst inward in a glittering wave. Screams tore through the showroom. Sophie saw people dive, saw Conrad hit the floor, saw the security guard reach for his holster too late. Before she could move, Matteo was over the counter. 1 second he was across from her. The next, he had Sophie against his chest, his body covering hers as shards rained across his black coat. His arm locked around her waist, hard and protective, forcing her down behind the repair counter. His other hand held a gun she had not seen him draw. The sound came again. A sharp crack from outside. A bullet punched through the velvet display behind them, scattering diamonds like stars across the floor. Sophie gasped. Matteo's hand tightened. "Don't move," he said against her ear. His voice was calm. That terrified her more than the gunfire. His bodyguards moved like shadows becoming violence. One dragged Bianca down behind a pillar. Another fired toward the broken window. A third slammed the door shut with his shoulder. Sophie smelled gunpowder, rain, and Matteo's cologne. Something dark, expensive, and clean. Her cheek was pressed against his shirt. Beneath the layers of wool and muscle, his heart was steady. Hers was trying to escape. Across the shattered showroom, Bianca was screaming, but Sophie did not miss the way Bianca clutched her hand to her chest, not in fear, to hide the ring. Matteo noticed too. His eyes followed the movement, then lowered to Sophie. For the first time his expression shifted, not warmth, not softness, interest, dangerous interest, because Sophie had seen the fake diamond, and now someone had tried to kill her for it. Before Matteo Voss walked into her life, Sophie Lane's world was small, precise, and quietly exhausting. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a closed laundromat in southeast Portland, where the radiator hissed like an old woman with secrets, and rain found its way through the window frame every November. She paid her bills late but in full. She bought groceries with coupons. She kept a jar of loose stones on her kitchen shelf because even flawed things deserved light. Most people thought she was just a repair clerk. They saw the gray uniform. They saw the soft body. They saw the name tag, Sophie. They did not see the woman who could identify a diamond by its fire beneath low light. They did not know her grandfather had been a bench jeweler who taught her to hold a stone like it had a pulse. They did not know she had spent her teenage years breathing dust from old gold chains in the back of pawnshops, learning the difference between real value and expensive lies. At Bellwether Crown, she repaired broken clasps for women who never said thank you, and resized rings for men who stared at her chest while asking if she was sure she knew what she was doing. She always knew. That was the problem. The world forgave beautiful women for being sharp. It expected women like Sophie to be grateful for being allowed in the room. But Matteo Voss had walked into that room, placed a dynasty on her counter, and asked her to tell the truth. Now the truth had teeth. Less than 20 minutes after the shooting, Sophie sat inside the back of a black SUV, wrapped in a cashmere coat that was not hers, with 2 armed men in the front seat and Matteo Voss beside her. Portland blurred outside the tinted windows, wet streets, neon signs, people hurrying beneath umbrellas, unaware that Sophie's old life had cracked open behind bulletproof glass. Her hands were clenched in her lap. A tiny cut crossed one knuckle where glass had kissed her skin. Matteo looked at it, not at her face, at the cut. "Give me your hand." "No." His eyes lifted. Sophie immediately regretted the word. Not because she wanted to obey him, because men like Matteo were not used to hearing no. One of the bodyguards glanced at the rearview mirror. Matteo did not. He simply held out a white handkerchief. Sophie stared at it. "I'm not bleeding badly. You're bleeding. I've had worse paper cuts. That doesn't make this one acceptable." She looked at him then, confused by the phrasing, acceptable, as if injuries required his permission. "I need to go home," she said. "You need to stay alive. I don't know anything. You know the ring is fake. So does everyone who was in the store." "No," Matteo said. "Everyone in that store heard you say it. Only one person proved it." The SUV turned sharply. Sophie grabbed the door handle. "Where are you taking me?" "Somewhere my enemies can't reach you." "Your enemies?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I met you half an hour ago, and now someone wants you dead." "I didn't ask for that. No one ever does." The quiet answer caught her off guard. For a moment, the hard line of his face changed. Not softened, exactly, but shadowed. Then it was gone. Sophie looked away. On his left hand, a black signet ring caught the dim light. Voss family crest, a raven holding a key, the kind of symbol men killed for. "You should be with your fiancé," Sophie said. Matteo's gaze moved to the rain-streaked window. "Bianca is safe. You sound disappointed." His mouth barely moved. "You notice too much. It's my job. It may save your life. It may have ruined it." This time, he looked at her fully. Sophie hated the way his attention felt. like being placed under a jeweler's lamp, like every hidden flaw and secret fracture could become visible beneath him. "You think I ruined your life?" he asked. "I think rich people bring storms and act surprised when ordinary people get wet." A flicker crossed his eyes. Almost amusement. "Almost ordinary," he repeated. "Yes. There is nothing ordinary about a woman who tells a mafia boss his fiancée is wearing a fake diamond." Sophie's breath caught. There it was. The word nobody in the store had said aloud. Mafia. Matteo leaned closer, just enough that the air between them changed. "You should be afraid of me. Sophie Lane." "I am." "Good." Her throat tightened. His gaze dropped to her mouth for a fraction of a second, then returned to her eyes. "But you told the truth anyway." The SUV entered an underground garage beneath a black glass tower on the waterfront. The doors closed behind them with a heavy metallic groan. Sophie realized then that she was not being escorted. She was being contained. Matteo's penthouse looked like a museum designed by a lonely king. The elevator opened directly into a vast room of dark stone floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and low amber lighting. Beyond the glass, Portland shimmered in the rain. The river below was black and restless. Bridges glowed through mist like something half-remembered. Everything was expensive. Nothing looked lived in. Sophie stood near the entrance, clutching Matteo's coat around her shoulders, while his men moved silently behind her. One brought a medical kit. Another placed the engagement ring, sealed in a plastic evidence pouch, onto the marble island. Matteo removed his coat. There was blood on his sleeve. Sophie stiffened. Not a lot. A dark smear near his forearm where glass had cut through the fabric. He noticed her looking. "It isn't yours," he said. "That doesn't make it better." He paused, as if no one had ever said that to him. Then he rolled up his sleeve. The cut was shallow but jagged. Beneath the torn fabric, Sophie saw ink winding over his forearm ravens, thorns, a woman's eye, Latin words half hidden by muscle. One of his men stepped forward with gauze. Matteo waved him off. His eyes found Sophie. "Can you clean a wound?" Sophie stared at him. "I repair jewelry, not men." "Same principle. Steady hands. You have bodyguards." "I asked you." The room seemed to tighten around them. Sophie should have refused. Instead, she took the antiseptic from the kit and stepped closer. She told herself it was practical. He had shielded her from glass. Her basic human response was not emotional surrender. It was decency. Still, when her fingers touched his arm, his skin was warm. Too warm. He watched her face while she cleaned the cut. Not the wound. Her face. "You're angry," he said. "I was shot at during work." "You weren't shot." Comforting. His mouth almost curved. "Almost. You have a smart mouth for someone in my home. You have a dramatic home for someone pretending this is normal." One of the bodyguards made the mistake of coughing to hide a laugh. Matteo's eyes shifted. The man went pale. Sophie pressed gauze over the cut harder than necessary. Matteo looked back at her. "Careful. You said steady hands, not gentle ones." For the first time, he did smile. It was small, dangerous, gone quickly. Sophie's stomach betrayed her with a strange, unwelcome warmth. No, absolutely not. This man was dangerous, powerful, engaged, surrounded by weapons and secrets. He was not a romantic possibility. He was not even a safe room to stand in. He was a locked door with blood on the handle. She finished wrapping the bandage and stepped back. "There." Matteo flexed his hand once. "Thank you." The words sounded foreign in his mouth. Before Sophie could answer, an older man entered the room. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, elegant, with the relaxed posture of someone who had survived enough violence to stop flinching. "Matteo," he said. Bianca is at the Calder house. Her father is demanding answers. Matteo's expression shut down. Let him demand. The older man's eyes moved to Sophie. And this is the woman who identified the fake. Sophie lifted her chin. The older man studied her the way appraisers studied stones, searching for weakness. I am Enzo Voss, he said. Matteo's uncle. His smile was courteous. His eyes were not. You have caused quite a problem, Miss Lane. No, Sophie said. Whoever swapped that diamond caused the problem. Enzo's smile faded. Matteo looked at Sophie again. That look, as if she had become more interesting against his will. Enzo folded his hands. This matter concerns two families with long memories. It would be best if Miss Lane returned home and forgot what she saw. She can't forget what someone is willing to kill her for, Matteo said. Then perhaps she should be encouraged to remember less publicly. The words were polite. The threat was not. Sophie felt cold crawl up her spine. Matteo's voice lowered. Careful, uncle. Enzo held his gaze for a long moment, then bowed his head slightly. Of course. When he left, the silence he left behind felt dirty. Sophie turned to Matteo. Your uncle wants me gone. My uncle wants many things. Am I allowed to know what you want? No. The answer should have angered her. It did, but it also scared her, because he said it like the truth cost him something. He picked up the evidence pouch with the ring inside. This ring was made for my grandmother. My mother wore it until the night she died. Sophie's anger softened before she could stop it. Matteo looked down at the diamond that was not a diamond. The real stone was called the Saint's Eye. It disappeared for 3 months after my mother's murder. When it returned, my father locked it in a private vault and told everyone it was only sentimental. It wasn't. No, his hand closed around the pouch. My father hid account numbers inside the setting. Names, roots, debts, insurance against every family that smiled at our table while sharpening knives beneath it. Sophie understood slowly. The real diamond is a key to money, evidence, leverage. His eyes hardened, and if Bianca's ring is fake, the real stone is already in enemy hands. Sophie looked toward the elevator, suddenly aware of how high above the city she was. Then why do you need me? Because whoever replaced it fooled my vault master, my household jeweler, and my fiancé. Matteo stepped closer. They will not fool you. No. He stopped. Sophie forced herself not to step back. No, she repeated. I am not getting dragged into a mafia war because I know how to use a loop. You already are. Then drag me out. His expression did not move, but his eyes darkened. I don't drag people out of wars, Sophie. I win them. That's your problem, not mine. It became mine the moment you bled on my floor. She glanced down. A tiny drop of blood had fallen from her cut knuckle onto the marble. Matteo saw it too. His jaw tightened. Sophie wrapped her hand in the edge of his coat, suddenly furious that her body would show vulnerability when her voice was trying not to. I want to go home, she said. And I want to know who betrayed me. Then we both get to be disappointed. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Matteo said, Take her home. Sophie blinked. The victory did not feel like victory. Matteo turned away before she could read his face, but put 2 men outside her building. Sophie's breath caught. He looked back. Protection, not permission. I don't want your protection. You'll have it anyway. Because you care. His eyes went cold again. Because you are evidence. The words hit harder than they should have. Evidence. Not a woman. Not a person. A thing to be preserved until useful. Sophie lifted her chin and handed him back his coat. Then preserve this. She walked to the elevator without looking back. But as the doors closed, she saw him watching her. Not like evidence. Like a man trying to convince himself that was all she was. By morning, Sophie's life had been destroyed in 6 different ways. The jewelry store fired her by email before sunrise. The official reason was failure to maintain client confidentiality during a sensitive transaction. The unofficial reason arrived 20 minutes later, when paparazzi photos appeared online of Sophie being led into Matteo Voss' SUV wrapped in his coat. The headlines were merciless. Mafia heir's engagement explodes after curvy Clark's scandal. Who is the mystery woman seen leaving with Matteo Voss? Bianca called her humiliated by jewelry store employee. By noon, strangers were calling Sophie a homewrecker. By 2, someone had spray-painted gold digger across the laundromat door beneath her apartment. By 3, an unmarked black SUV sat across the street. Sophie stood behind her curtain, watching rain bead on its hood. 2 men sat inside. Matteo's men, probably, or someone else. That was the problem with entering a world of shadows. After a while, every shadow looked armed. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. It buzzed again. Then again. Finally, she answered. Matteo's voice filled her ear. Stay away from the windows. Sophie's fingers tightened around the phone. Are you spying on me? I have men. Outside. I noticed. Then why are you standing in front of a window? Because I enjoy terrifying billionaires with poor security boundaries. I'm not a billionaire. That's what offended you. A pause. Then, quietly, someone leaked your address. Sophie stopped breathing. Matteo continued. The paint on the door was a warning. Not from me. Her anger faltered, replaced by something colder. How do you know? Because if I wanted to threaten you, Sophie, you wouldn't have to wonder. She hated that she believed him, comforting again. You need to leave the apartment. No, Sophie. There was something in the way he said her name that made it feel less like a word and more like a hand closing around a wrist. She lowered her voice. This is my home. It is exposed. It is mine. Silence. Then he said, pack a bag. I said no, and I heard you. For some reason, that scared her more than if he had argued. Then why do I feel like you were still going to get your way? Because someone is walking up your stairs. The blood left her face. A creak sounded outside her door. Sophie turned slowly. Another creak. Her apartment was old. The stairs complained under everyone. But this was different. Slow. Careful. The phone pressed against Sophie's ear. Matteo's voice changed. Go to the bathroom. Lock the door. Now. Sophie moved. Not because she trusted him, because she heard metal touch her lock. She ran to the bathroom and locked herself inside just as her apartment door clicked open. Her breath shattered. Through the thin wall, she heard footsteps. One pair. Then another. Her tiny apartment filled with strangers. Drawers opened. A chair scraped. Glass broke in the kitchen. Sophie, Matteo said through the phone, quiet and lethal. Do not make a sound. She covered her mouth with her hand. Someone walked past the bathroom door. Stopped. The knob turned. Once. Twice. A man's voice muttered, "In here." The door shook. Sophie backed against the sink, eyes burning. Then the apartment exploded with sound. Shouting. A body hitting the wall. Gunmetal clicking. Matteo's voice. No longer through the phone but outside the bathroom door. "Open it." Sophie froze. "Sophie," he said. "Lower now. It's me." Her hands shook so badly she could barely turn the lock. When she opened the door, Matteo stood there in a black suit, rain on his shoulders, fury carved into every line of his face. Behind him, one of his men held a bleeding intruder against the floor. Another searched the closet. Her belongings were scattered everywhere. Her grandmother's jewelry tools lay spilled like bones across the kitchen table. Sophie stared. Then Matteo stepped in front of her, blocking the view. Too late. She had already seen the photographs, dozens of them, pinned to the wall beside her bookshelf. Photos of Sophie leaving work, Sophie buying groceries, Sophie standing at the bus stop, Sophie asleep through her bedroom window. Her stomach turned. Matteo saw her face change and followed her gaze. For one horrifying second, he looked as stunned as she felt. Then the room went colder than winter. His voice became almost gentle. "Who put those there?" The man on the floor spat blood onto Sophie's rug and smiled. "Ask your bride." Matteo went still. Sophie looked at him. His fiancée, Bianca, the woman whose diamond was fake. The woman whose face had gone pale. The woman who had called Sophie jealous in front of everyone. Matteo crouched in front of the intruder. "Tell me why Bianca Calder is watching Sophie Lane." The man said nothing. Matteo leaned closer. Sophie did not see what he did. She only saw the intruder's smile vanish. A minute later, Matteo stood. "Take him downstairs." His men dragged the man out. Sophie was shaking now, not with fear alone, but with violation. Her home had been touched. Her private life had been turned into evidence. Matteo approached carefully, too carefully, as if she was something wounded that might bite. "Sophie, don't." He stopped. Her eyes burned. "You said I was evidence. Congratulations. Someone filed me on a wall." His face tightened. "I didn't know. Am I supposed to believe that?" "Yes." "Why?" His jaw flexed. "Because if I had been watching you, I would have done a better job keeping them away." It was arrogant, possessive, insane, and somehow, in that moment, horribly convincing. Sophie looked around her ruined apartment, her bills on the floor, her mugs broken, her bed visible through the open door where someone had photographed her sleeping. She wrapped her arms around herself. Matteo's hand lifted, almost touched her shoulder, stopped. His restraint hurt more than contact would have. "You need to come with me," he said. "This time." Sophie did not say no. The safe house was not a house. It was a fortress on the Oregon coast, all black cedar, glass walls, and stormlight, perched above cliffs where the Pacific beat itself white against the rocks. Matteo brought Sophie there before nightfall. He did not ask permission. He also did not touch her unless he had to. That contradiction became a quiet torture. He controlled the roads, the guards, the phones, the locks. But when Sophie stepped out of the SUV, shaken and furious, he only stood beside her in the wind and waited. The ocean roared below them. "You're safe here," he said. Sophie looked at the house. People always say that before something terrible happens. His eyes moved over her face. "Then I'll say something else." "What?" "No one gets to you unless they go through me." It should not have comforted her. It did. Inside, Matteo gave her the west bedroom, a phone with only 3 numbers programmed into it, and a velvet case filled with Voss family jewelry. Sophie stared at the case on the bed. "You brought me here to work. I brought you here to live. And work. And work," he admitted. She almost smiled. Almost. For 3 days, the storm trapped them inside the cliffside house. Rain struck the glass so hard it sounded like applause from ghosts. The sky stayed gray. The ocean stayed angry. Guards moved outside in dark coats while Sophie sat beneath warm lamps, examining Voss heirlooms one by one. Necklaces, cufflinks, brooches, a ruby bracelet, a sapphire crucifix. A gold locket containing a woman's photograph so faded Sophie could barely see her smile. Matteo's mother. Sophie knew without asking. Matteo worked across the room, taking calls in low Italian, issuing orders that made men on the other end fall silent. Sometimes he watched Sophie when he thought she did not notice. She always noticed. "What?" she asked on the second night, without looking up. "You talk to stones." Sophie froze. "I do not." "You do. I inspect them." "You apologized to that emerald. It had been badly recut." "That sounds like an apology." She glanced up. Matteo stood near the fireplace, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tattoos visible, whiskey untouched in his hand. He looked less like a king here, and more like a man haunting his own life. "I don't like seeing valuable things damaged by careless people," Sophie said. His gaze held hers. "Neither do I." The air changed. Sophie looked down quickly. "You can say things like that." "Why? Because you're re-engaged?" "No." Her hand stilled. He set the glass down. "I am contracted. That's a beautiful distinction for ugly behavior." His mouth tightened. "There is no love between Bianca and me, but there is a ring, a fake one, that you gave her. That was placed on her hand for a photograph 3 hours before the announcement." Sophie looked up slowly. Matteo's face revealed nothing, but his eyes did. "Not guilt, contempt. You never proposed." "No." "Does she know that?" "She knows exactly what this is." Sophie should have felt relieved. Instead, the information made everything more dangerous, because if Matteo was not a cheating man, then the thing growing between them had fewer walls to hide behind. She turned back to the ruby bracelet. "That doesn't change anything. It changes some things." "No," she said firmly. "It doesn't." He crossed the room slowly. Sophie's pulse changed with every step. Matteo stopped beside her chair, close enough that she could see a faint scratch near his wrist from the jewelry store glass. "You afraid of me?" "Yes, but not only afraid." Her breath caught. He leaned one hand on the table, close to hers but not touching. "Sophie." The sound of her name in his voice felt like a door being locked from the inside. She stood too fast, the chair scraping behind her. "Don't do that." "What?" "Act like I'm something you've decided to want." His expression darkened. "Decided?" he repeated softly. "Yes. Men like you don't feel. You acquire." For a moment he said nothing. Then he stepped back. The distance felt like punishment. "You rewrite," he said. The words landed coldly. Sophia's throat tightened. "I acquire," Matteo continued, "territory, loyalty, debt, and silence. But I do not acquire people who look at me the way you do. How do I look at you? Like you see the monster and still expect the man to answer." Sophie had no defense for that. The storm struck the windows. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled over the ocean. Then Matteo's phone rang. Whatever had been between them vanished. He answered, listened. His face changed. "Where?" he asked. A pause. Then, "Bring him to me." He ended the call. Sophie's heart kicked. What happened? Our man in the Calder house found a private account tied to the missing diamond. Bianca. Not only Bianca. His gaze met hers. My uncle. Enzo. The polite smile. The courteous threat. Sophie felt cold. Matteo looked toward the black ocean. "And there's more." "What?" He hesitated. That scared her. "Bianca has a child." Sophie blinked. "A child?" "A son. 4 years old. Hidden in a house outside Astoria." "Yours?" His eyes cut to hers. "No." The single word was quiet, but absolute. Sophie understood the shape of it then. The fake engagement, the stolen diamond, the hidden child, the rival family. Bianca was not just betraying Matteo, she was building a future over his grave. The first time Matteo took Sophie into the underworld, he dressed her in emerald silk. She hated that the dress fit perfectly. She hated that someone in his household had known her size, her measurements, the exact shade of green that would make her skin glow and her dark hair look softer around her face. She hated even more that when she stepped into the coastal house's main room, Matteo forgot how to speak. Only for a second. But she saw it. His eyes moved over her, not crudely, not quickly, but with a stillness that felt more intimate than touch. The emerald dress wrapped her curves without apology. Her shoulders were bare beneath the delicate drape. Her lips were painted deep rose. For once, she did not look like a woman trying to take up less space. She looked like a woman entering a room that should have made room for her. Matteo's jaw tightened. "You look," he began. "Careful," Sophie said. His eyes returned to hers. Dangerous. Her heart stumbled. "Good," she said, though her voice was not as steady as she wanted. They drove back to Portland in a convoy of black SUVs. The event was held beneath the city in an old private club, hidden below a luxury hotel, an underground ballroom of black marble, gold sconces, red velvet, and men who smiled like knives. Officially, it was a charity auction. Unofficially, it was where the Voss and Calder families would pretend there was still peace. Sophie entered on Matteo's arm. The room noticed. Bianca noticed most of all. She stood near a champagne tower in a white satin gown, every inch the wounded fiancé. Cameras flashed at her side. Her father, Victor Calder, stood behind her, silver-bearded and cold-eyed. Enzo Voss stood nearby, speaking softly to a judge Sophie recognized from television. When Bianca saw Sophie, her smile became a blade. "Well," Bianca said as Matteo approached, "you brought the clerk." Matteo did not look at Bianca. He looked at the room. "Sophie Lane is here as my private appraiser." The title moved through the crowd like smoke. Private appraiser, not mistress, not scandal, not accident. A role. Protection disguised as status. Sophie felt the shift immediately. People who had looked at her with contempt now looked with caution. Bianca stepped closer. "That dress is brave." Sophie smiled gently. So was wearing a fake diamond in public. A few people inhaled. Bianca's eyes flashed. Matteo's mouth did not move, but Sophie felt his approval, like heat. Victor Calder's voice cut in. "My daughter has been humiliated enough." Matteo turned to him. "Then teach her to lie better." The ballroom froze. Bianca's hand trembled around her champagne glass. Enzo stepped forward, voice smooth. "Matteo, this is not the place." "No," Matteo said. "This is exactly the place." A large screen behind the auction stage lit up suddenly. Gasps spread through the room. Photographs appeared. Not of Sophie, of bank transfers, vault entries, security logs. Then one image filled the screen. Bianca Calder entering a private vault at 2:13 a.m. Enzo Voss beside her. Sophie's stomach dropped. Matteo had known. Not everything, but enough. He had turned the gala into a trap. Bianca looked at the screen, then at Matteo. "You think this proves anything?" "No," Matteo said. "She does." Every eye turned to Sophie. Matteo held out a small velvet box. Inside lay a diamond pendant from Bianca's throat. Sophie's chest tightened. She had seen it when Bianca entered. A pear-shaped stone surrounded by tiny sapphires. Too bright, too familiar. Matteo placed it in Sophia's palm. "Tell the room." Bianca lunged forward. "Don't you dare!" Matteo's bodyguard blocked her. Sophie lifted the pendant beneath the light. For one breath, the entire underground world waited on her voice. The stone burned blue-white. Near its center, beneath the table facet, Sophie saw it. A tiny, feather-shaped inclusion. Like a white flame trapped in ice. The same inclusion described in the old Voss records. The saint's eye. Sophie looked up. "This is the real diamond." Chaos erupted. Bianca went pale again. This time, there was no recovering. Victor Calder seized her arm. "What have you done?" Bianca's mask shattered. "You don't understand," she hissed. "He was going to destroy us." Matteo's face remained still, but Sophie felt the violence moving under his calm. "No," he said. "I was going to marry you." Bianca laughed, wild and broken. "You were going to own me. I never wanted you." The words struck harder than cruelty, because they were true. Bianca's eyes filled with hatred. Then the lights went out. For 1 second, the ballroom plunged into black. Sophie heard screams, glass breaking. A gunshot. A hand grabbed her wrist. Not Matteo's. She knew instantly. The grip was wrong, too frantic, too cruel. She cried out as someone dragged her backward through the dark. "Sophie!" Matteo roared. It was the first time she heard panic in his voice. Then something hard struck the back of her head, and the world disappeared. Sophie woke to the smell of salt, gasoline, and old metal. Her wrists were tied to the arms of a wooden chair. Her head throbbed. A single industrial lamp swung above her, lighting a warehouse lined with rusted jewelry benches and abandoned polishing machines. An old gem-cutting factory, somewhere near the docks. Rain hammered the roof. Bianca stood in front of her, still in the white satin gown, though the hem was dirty now. Her perfect hair had come loose. Her makeup had streaked beneath her eyes. Without the mask, she looked younger and far more dangerous. "You ruined everything," Bianca whispered. Sophie swallowed against the dryness in her throat. "You did that before I got involved." Bianca slapped her. Pain flashed across Sophie's cheek. She tasted blood. Bianca leaned close. "Do not mistake survival for courage." Sophie looked at her. "I don't." A man emerged from the shadows carrying a small velvet pouch. He was handsome in a careless, cruel way. Dark blonde hair, pale eyes, a knife scar near his mouth. Luca Caruso. Sophie knew his face from whispered articles and police leaks. Rival family, smuggler, Bianca's lover, if the files Matteo had shown her were true, and father of the hidden child. Luca poured the saint's eye into his palm. The diamond caught the swinging light. "Authenticate it," he said. Sophie looked at the stone, then at Bianca. "You already know it's real. I need the vault code inside the setting," Luca said. "And you're going to find it." Sophie's heart sank. The diamond alone was not enough. Matteo's father had hidden the key in the old mounting, a code carved too small for ordinary eyes, protected by the setting. But Bianca had removed the stone from the ring and placed it in the pendant. If the engraving had transferred with the original collar, it might still be there. And Sophie was the only one in the room who knew where to look. "No," she said. Luca smiled. Bianca moved aside. Behind her, another lamp clicked on. Sophie stopped breathing. On a small chair near the wall sat a little boy in pajamas, clutching a stuffed rabbit. He was sleeping, 4 years old, dark blonde curls. Bianca's son. Sophie stared in horror. Bianca's face changed as she looked at him. For the first time, something like real fear crossed her features. "You brought him here?" Sophie whispered. Luca shrugged. "Insurance." Bianca turned on him. "You said he would stay in the car, and you said Matteo would be dead by midnight. We were all disappointed." The child stirred. Bianca's eyes filled with panic. Sophie understood then that Bianca was not innocent, not even close. She had lied, stolen, betrayed, and helped start a war. But she was also trapped beside a man worse than herself. Luca crouched before Sophie. "Find the code, Miss Lane, or the next generation of colder blood ends here." Bianca whispered, "Luca, don't." He ignored her. Sophie looked at the child, then at the diamond, her mind sharpened through the fear. A stone always told the truth. But people lied around it. "Untie one hand," Sophie said. "I need tools." Luca watched her, then nodded. A guard cut one wrist free and placed a loop, tweezers, and a small light on the table beside her. Sophie's fingers ached as blood returned to them. She picked up the stone. At first glance, it was magnificent. Old European cut, slight asymmetry, warm fire beneath blue-white brilliance. Modern buyers would have called the imperfections flaws. Sophie saw history. She turned the stone slowly. There, a thin platinum collar had been left attached near the girdle, disguised beneath the pendant setting. Inside it, barely visible, were microscopic marks, not numbers, letters. Sophie's pulse jumped, but she did not read them aloud. Instead, she frowned. "What?" Luca snapped. "This isn't the real Saint's Eye." Bianca's head jerked up. Luca's smile vanished. Sophie kept her face calm. "It's close. Very close. But the girdle thickness is wrong. The inclusion pattern is similar, but not identical." Luca ripped the diamond from her hand and shoved it beneath the light. "You're lying." "Yes," Sophie said. The room froze. She looked directly at him. "But now you're wondering why." Luca backhanded her hard enough to knock the chair sideways. Pain exploded through her shoulder as she hit the concrete. The little boy woke and started crying. Bianca screamed his name. In the chaos, Sophie curled her freed hand beneath her body and did the only thing she could. She slid the tiny platinum collar off the diamond. It cut into her fingertip. She closed it inside her fist. Luca grabbed her hair and hauled her upright. "Read the code." Sophie smiled through tears. "I can't." "Why?" "Because you just broke the setting." His face twisted. Then, gunfire erupted outside. Not random, controlled, approaching. Luca looked toward the warehouse doors. Bianca whispered, "Matteo." The name moved through the room like judgment. The first door blew inward. Matteo Voss entered through smoke and rain in a black coat, gun in hand, face carved from fury. He did not look at Luca. He did not look at Bianca. He looked for Sophie. When he saw her tied to the chair, blood at her lip, one wrist raw from rope, something in him changed. Not broke, released. The men around Luca raised their weapons. Matteo's voice was quiet. "Anyone pointing a gun at her dies first." Some men hesitated. That was enough. Matteo's guards came in from both sides. The warehouse became motion, shouting, bodies slamming into metal benches, muzzle flashes lighting the rain-black windows. Sophie tried to twist free, her fist still closed around the platinum collar. Luca grabbed Bianca's son and pressed a gun near the child's head. Everyone stopped. Bianca made a broken sound. Matteo's gun remained steady, but his eyes shifted to the little boy. Not coldly, carefully. That mattered. "Let him go," Matteo said. Luca laughed. "You always wanted an heir, didn't you? Here's one. Not yours. But Bianca planned to make him yours after you were dead." Bianca sobbed. "Matteo, quiet." Luca snarled. Sophie watched Matteo's face. The humiliation was public now. The betrayal, complete. His fiancée had stolen from him, plotted with his uncle, loved his enemy, hidden a child meant to inherit his empire after his murder. Any other man in that world might have burned the room down. Matteo looked only at the child. "His name?" he asked Bianca. She trembled. "Nico." Matteo lowered his gun. Luca smiled. Sophie's heart stopped. Then Matteo said, "Nico, close your eyes." The boy obeyed, crying. Matteo moved so fast Sophie barely saw it. A shot cracked from the catwalk above. One of Matteo's men. Luca's gun flew from his hand as he screamed and stumbled back. Matteo crossed the distance and struck him hard enough to drive him into the concrete. The room erupted again. Bianca ran to her son and pulled him into her arms. Sophie fought the rope around her remaining wrist. Matteo was there before she could free herself. He cut the rope with a knife and caught her as she sagged forward. For one breath, she was against him again. Like the jewelry store, like the beginning of everything. But this time, his hand shook. Just slightly. Only she could feel it. "Sophie," he said, voice rough. "Look at me." She did. His face was still controlled, but his eyes were not. There was fear in them. Real fear. Not of death, of losing her. I'm okay, she whispered. You are not. No. She opened her bloody fist and dropped the platinum collar into his palm. But I got your code. Matteo stared at the tiny piece of metal, then at her. Something devastated moved across his face. You should have waited for me. Sophie laughed weakly. You're welcome. He touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, so carefully it almost hurt. I am going to spend the rest of my life furious that you are brave. Her throat tightened. Don't make promises during shootouts. It's over. Behind him, Bianca sat on the concrete, holding her son and crying silently. Enzo Voss was dragged in through the side door by two of Matteo's men, his silver hair wet from rain, his face pale with defeat. Matteo stood slowly. The man who had touched Sophie's cheek vanished. The ruler returned. Enzo lifted his chin. You would destroy your own blood over a clerk. Matteo stepped toward him. The warehouse went quiet. She has a name. Enzo's eyes flicked to Sophie. Matteo's voice lowered. And you will never say clerk again, like it means less than queen. Sophie's breath caught. Enzo tried to smile. This is weakness. No, Matteo said. This is the first honest thing this family has had in years. He turned to his men. Take him. Enzo's face twisted. Matteo, you sold my mother's ring. You sold my peace. You sold a child to a man who would use him as a shield. Matteo's eyes hardened. You are not family. Enzo was dragged away, shouting curses that disappeared beneath the rain. Bianca looked up, trembling. Matteo turned to her. For a long moment, Sophie did not know what he would do. Neither did Bianca. That was the terror of him. He walked over slowly and crouched before the child, not the mother. Nico looked at him with wet eyes. Matteo removed the black signet ring from his own hand and placed it on the floor between them. You will not remember me as the man who punished you for your parents' sins, he said quietly. Bianca broke down. Matteo stood and looked at her. Take your son and disappear. Her lips parted. You letting me live? No, he said. I'm letting him live without watching his mother die. Bianca stared at him. Then at Sophie. Something like shame crossed her face. Not enough to redeem her, but enough to make her human. I hated you, Bianca whispered to Sophie, because he looked at you once like he had never looked at me. Sophie said nothing. Bianca held her son tighter. And because you told the truth when everyone else was paid not to. Matteo turned away. Get them out. As Bianca was escorted through the rain, Sophie watched her vanish into the grey morning with the child in her arms. The war was not over. But something had ended. A contract. A fake diamond pretending to be forever. Sophie spent 2 nights in a private hospital suite that looked more like a luxury hotel room than a place for recovery. Matteo stayed outside her door the first night. Not inside. Outside. Sophie discovered this at 3:17 a.m. when she woke from a nightmare and opened the door barefoot. He was seated in a chair across the hall, still in yesterday's black shirt, sleeves rolled, head bowed, hands clasped. 2 guards stood at the end of the corridor. Matteo looked up immediately. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. I don't sleep in hospitals. Why? He looked past her, into some memory she could not reach. My mother died in one. Sophie's anger softened. She stepped into the hall. You don't have to sit out here. Yes, he said. I do. Because I'm evidence. His face tightened. No. The word was quiet, heavy. Sophie crossed her arms, suddenly aware of her hospital robe and bare feet. What am I, then? Matteo looked at her for a long time. Too long. As if the answer was dangerous enough to change both their lives. My punishment, he said. Sophie frowned. That's romantic. I am not good at romantic. I noticed. His mouth almost curved, but his eyes stayed serious. "You make me want things I have no right to want." She leaned against the doorframe. "Like what?" "To keep you where I can see you." "That sounds like a threat." "It is a confession." Her heart moved painfully. Matteo stood, slow and controlled, leaving enough space between them. "I know what I am," he said. "I know what my world does to people near me. I know you should leave Portland, change your name, take the money I'll put in an account you'll pretend not to need, and build a quiet life somewhere my enemies will never find you." Sophie swallowed. "And is that what you want?" His eyes darkened. "No." The honesty was almost cruel. "What do you want?" His hand lifted again. This time, he touched her, only her cheek, only with his fingertips. But Sophie felt it everywhere. "I want to be selfish," he said. Her breath caught. "I want to ask you to stay. I want to put guards at every door and diamonds on every finger, and make every man who ever made you feel small lower his eyes when you enter a room." His voice roughened. "I want to learn what you eat when you re-sad, what songs you hate, why you apologize to damaged emeralds, and what your laugh sounds like when you forget to protect yourself." Sophia's eyes burned. "That's too much." "I know. You can't own me, Matteo." His hand fell away. "No." The answer surprised her. He looked down, then back at her. "But I can belong to you." The hallway went silent. Sophie felt the words like a key turning. "You don't know how to belong to anyone," she whispered. "No," he said, "but I know how to learn from the only woman who ever told me the truth when lying would have saved her." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then footsteps sounded at the end of the corridor. The doctor. The moment broke. Sophie stepped back into the room, heart pounding. Matteo did not follow. That restraint, the fact that he could have crossed every boundary and chose not to, was the thing that finally frightened her most, because it made him harder to hate. 3 weeks later, the Voss-Calder engagement was officially dissolved. The public statement cited private family matters. Nobody believed it. By then, the scandal had become legend. The fake diamond, the underground gala, the missing heirloom. Bianca Calder disappearing with a child no one knew existed. Enzo Voss removed from every board, every property, every photograph. And Sophie Lane, the curvy jewelry clerk who had exposed the lie. People who had mocked her online now called her brave. Stores that had rejected her applications suddenly wanted interviews. Bellwether Crown sent flowers. Sophie threw them away. Matteo did not send flowers. He sent the deed to an empty storefront in Portland's Pearl District. Sophie called him immediately. "No," he answered on the first ring. "Good morning." "No, you haven't heard the proposal. I saw the deed. It's a storefront. It's a building. It has poor lighting and a terrible security system. Both can be fixed." "Matteo." "Sophie, I am not accepting a building. You said men like me acquire. I am trying not to acquire. I am offering. You are offering commercial real estate." "Yes. That is not normal." "I'm aware." She pressed her fingers to her forehead. "Why?" His voice changed slightly. "Because Bellwether fired you for telling the truth. Because you are too skilled to repair other people's lies from a back counter. Because Portland should have one honest jeweler." Sophie closed her eyes. Her chest hurt. "You can't buy me a dream." "No," he said, "but I can open the door and let you decide whether to walk in." That was the problem with Matteo Voss. He was terrifying when he was cruel, devastating when he was careful. A month later, Sophie opened Lane Stone. Not because Matteo gave her the building, because she signed a legal agreement forcing him to accept monthly rent so low it made his lawyer wince and Sophie smile. The shop was small, warm, and filled with light. No velvet arrogance. No marble intimidation. Just wood counters, brass lamps, repair benches visible behind glass, and a sign near the entrance that read, "Beautiful things deserve honest hands." On opening night, Portland rain softened the streets outside. Sophie wore a deep green dress, not silk this time, but hers. Her hair fell in loose waves. Her body filled the room without apology. People came. Artists, brides, old clients, reporters, women who had seen the headlines and wanted to shake her hand, men who spoke more respectfully when they saw Matteo Voss standing quietly near the back wall, with 2 guards outside and his eyes on Sophie like she was the only valuable thing in the room. He did not approach her for the first hour. He let her have the room. That meant more than any diamond. When the last guest left, Sophie locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. Matteo remained by the repair counter. On the black velvet between them sat the Voss ring, restored. The real Saint's Eye had been returned to its original setting. The platinum collar was repaired. The hidden code had been removed and locked away in a vault Sophie had no desire to visit. Under the warm lamp, the diamond burned with old fire. Sophie looked at it, then at Matteo. "It's beautiful," she said. "It was my mother's. I know. She wore it for 26 years. Sophie touched the edge of the velvet, careful not to touch the ring. "Are you asking me to appraise it?" "No." Her pulse changed. Matteo stepped closer. No bodyguards. No guns visible. No ballroom. No blood on the floor. Just rain against glass and a man who had learned how to wait. "I am not asking you to wear my mother's ring," he said. Sophia's breath caught. He looked down at the diamond. "This ring belonged to women who had no choice. My grandmother married for survival. My mother married for peace. Bianca would have worn it for power." His eyes lifted to Sophia's. "You will not wear it because history expects you to." Sophie could barely speak. "Then why bring it?" "Because it was the first lie you uncovered." His voice softened. "And I wanted it to be present for the first truth I say without fear." The room seemed to hold its breath. Matteo reached into his coat and took out a smaller box. Sophie stared. Matteo, not a proposal. Her heart stumbled in confusion. He opened the box. Inside was a simple ring set with a small Oregon sunstone, warm and golden, glowing like captured sunrise. Around it, tiny, imperfect diamonds formed an uneven halo stone Sophie had once kept in a jar on her kitchen shelf because no one else wanted them. She recognized them immediately. Her flawed things. Her rescued light. Tears rose before she could stop them. "How did you?" "You talk to stones," he said. I listened. A laugh broke through her tears. Matteo's face changed at the sound, like he had been waiting his entire life to hear it. He took the ring from the box, but did not reach for her hand. "This is not ownership," he said. "Not a contract. Not a cage. Wear it if you want. Refuse it if you want. Throw it at my head if I deserve it. You might. I probably will." She laughed again, crying now. His eyes stayed on hers. "I love you, Sophie Lane." The words were calm. No performance. No demand. No dramatic kneeling in a crowded room. Just truth. A diamond would have envied it. Sophie looked at the man before her, the monster, the ruler, the lonely boy shaped by inheritance and violence, the man who had shielded her from bullets before he knew her, the man who had called her evidence because he was afraid of calling her necessary, the man who could destroy enemies without blinking, but stopped his hand an inch from her shoulder because she had said no. She stepped closer. Matteo went still. Sophie held out her hand. His breath changed, only slightly, but she heard it. He slid the sunstone ring onto her finger. It fit. "Of course it did. You're re-dangerous," she whispered. "Yes. I'm still afraid of you sometimes. I know. I won't be hidden in some tower. No. I won't be polished into something easier to display." His eyes darkened with something like reverence. "Never. And if you ever call me evidence again, I'll sell your family diamonds at a discount." A slow smile touched his mouth. "There she is." Sophie looked down at the ring. The sunstone glowed warmly against her skin. Not the biggest stone in the room, not the most expensive, the truest. Matteo touched her hand, waiting for permission even now. Sophie gave it by lacing her fingers through his. Outside, black SUVs waited in the rain. Enemies still existed. Wars did not end just because love entered the room. But inside Lane Stone, beneath warm golden light, Matteo Voss lowered his forehead to Sophie's hand, as if devotion were not weakness, but surrender. And Sophie, who had spent her life being underestimated by people who mistook softness for flaw, looked down at the most feared man in Portland and understood something that made her heart tremble. She had not saved him by loving the good parts. She had saved him by refusing to lie about the broken ones. Matteo lifted his head. "Come with me," he said. "Where?" His thumb brushed the ring on her finger. "Anywhere you choose." Sophie smiled through the last of her tears. For the first time in her life, the door was open. Not because a powerful man had unlocked it, because she had decided to walk through. And when Matteo Voss stepped into the rain beside her, holding her hand in front of his guards, his city, and every shadow waiting beyond the glass, he did not look like a mafia boss claiming a woman. He looked like a dangerous man finally brave enough to be claimed. The diamond in the window caught the light behind them. Real this time, but not nearly as rare as the truth.